I've yet to meet a creative person, be it a designer or an illustrator for that matter, who doesn't have a preferred way to work. Certain specific habits and methods they use in their workflow to make their job easier and more efficient. So in this movie, I want to go over one time-saving tactic you can use in Adobe Illustrator to speed up your vector building without compromising your craftsmanship, and it's keyboard shortcuts. I'll share the ones I use on a daily basis. I'll show you how you can change them yourself and also show you how you can use actions in combination with keyboard shortcuts to kind of create your own functionality. So let's jump into this. Now, I'm working on a Mac, and if you're working on a Mac, you're going to first want to go to your system preferences, to the keyboard system preference, and you want to check use F1, F2, etc. keys as standard function keys. Otherwise, what I'm going to show you inside of Illustrator isn't going to work properly. And you'll want to do the equivalent on a PC as well. I'm not exactly sure what they call it, but it should be able to be done on a PC because I have several friends who do it on PCs as well. So I just wanted to point that out. That's something you need to know before we do this. Let's jump to the first one and just review some of the ones that I use every day. Now, the reason why I use these is because when I switch from freehand, which I used 15 years, to Adobe Illustrator, is like having to learn vector art all over again. I thought there would be a lot of crossover, but there really wasn't. I had to set aside what I had done for 15 years and learn completely new. Well, some of the, if you go up to the menu and you pull down on a menu, you can see there's these commands to get to this functionality. If you can memorize this, you can get to it pretty quickly. My problem was I could never memorize all these things, and it was a waste of time to always having to go to a pull-down menu. So that's where keyboard shortcuts really shines. And the first one is make clipping mask. To make a clipping mask, I'm ironically going to show you one that's the F3 key keyboard shortcut, because I'll select the background element here since it's the same size I want to mask, and I'm going to hit F3 and it's going to make a clone of it. I'm going to show you that in a little bit. Once this is on top, this will be the mask. I'll select my artwork and I'm just going to hit F1 and it masks it. So that's what I use to mask. Keyboard shortcut, F2, this releases it. If I hit F2, it'll release that mask. Once again, F1 will make it apply again. So I use these every day as I work just to speed up the routine of building. When I'm creating illustration or design, I might be zoomed in on something. Let's say it's this design with the skull, and I want to create the same detailing I have on the right, but I want to do it on the left. Well, I'll select this shape and I'll hit my F3 key, which makes a Command-C, Command-F, and then it also brings it to the front. So 3 commands are recorded in action applied to the F3 key. This way, we'll go ahead and color this. I'll color this blue. We'll make another, I'll hit the F3 again, and this one will color green, and I'll just size this one down kind of like this. I might distort it a bit. All I'm doing is creating the same kind of shading as the one on the right. I'll select both of one. I'll go to minus front. You can tell an engineer name that function. And we'll sample the shading over here. I might select the yellow again, hit F3 again to make another shape. This one I'm going to color white, and this is going to end up being, the highlight on this eye. So that's how I'll use the clone command. Freehand that I used for 15 years had its own clone command. I get to Illustrator and realize there's no clone command. So that's when I read up on Illustrator, found out about keyboard shortcuts, found out about actions, and I basically designed my own functionality that doesn't exist in Illustrator, and that's a clone command. Once again, it's running these 3 commands, Command-C, Command-F, and then the command to bring to front is Shift plus Command plus bracket. I'm never going to memorize that, so it makes sense to simplify it into a 1-button push. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. This is send to back. This is pretty simple. Whatever elements, maybe I want this bone to be behind the other bone, so I can hit F4 and it pushes to the back. And again, F5 is bring to front. Maybe I change my mind, hit F5, that brings it to front. So that's all it is. F4, go to back, F5, bring to front. And I use this all the time because it's a lot faster than going up and using a pull-down menu. Everybody, every time I do a workshop, for example, I'll ask the crowd if I get to this point talking about keyboard shortcuts, and I'll say, how many people here know how to group something in Illustrator? Well, that's easy. Here we have a hummingbird. It's made up of all these pieces, highlight pieces here, piece of the wing here. All of these could be pulled out. So of course you want to select an item like this and you want to group it. Well, everybody knows what group is. It's just Command G. That's a given. It's almost universal in every app to group, Command G. What isn't so universal, and I couldn't remember the command to do it, was ungroup. So I applied the F6 key. So once something is grouped like this, and I can move it around, that's why you'd want to group it. I can hit F6, and now it's ungrouped. I can go in and move stuff. So that's what ungroup is. I use this all the time, mainly because I couldn't remember the command for it. So the next one, this is where things get a little complicated in Illustrator, dealing with compound paths. Now I'm just going to walk you through this, and you're probably going to go, holy crap, I run into that all the time, because I ran into it all the time, and you might have ran into it and you thought you were doing something wrong, and I'm here to tell you you're not doing anything wrong. So if we're creating this brand logo design down here and we're working on the brand mark, you might have all these elliptical shapes. You're working out the mark here and you're just experimenting at this point. We might select all of these like this. And once we have them selected, just so they stay in perfect orientation with one another, we might go Command G and group it. And then we decide, you know what, I want to cut this in half because we're intending to make it look like our final design down here at the bottom. And I want to lop off half of this so I can copy it, reflect it, and color them each differently. That's great. We have it selected. We select this shape to trim it. We can go down to minus front and you can click it and then this happens. You might not have known, this is a pretty obvious, something disappeared when I did this. This one you're not going to miss. But at times, if you're using this functionality, this is why you don't want to use it on a group. It doesn't work good on a group. And I'll admit, Illustrator is inconsistent when it comes to compound paths. The shape building tool rarely has any problem with compound paths. The Pathfinder methods to do simple shape building, it's something you have to pay attention to. And this is why I created an F7 key so I could address this quickly, because I don't want to have to select something, go up to Object and pull down to make a compound path. That just takes too long. So I just select something. If you look in Appearance, it's a group. I can hit F7 and now it's a compound. Then I can take a shape like this and I can trim it, and it works the way it should. But notice Illustrator's behavior is it will return it to a group nature. This is kind of frustrating. Some people would say after they see this, well, why do you do that? Why don't you build non-destructively? Well, here's why I don't like non-destructive. If I hold Option down and I hit minus front, yeah, if it's not selected, visually it looks the way it should. But technically, this over here, even if I colorize this, let's go ahead and colorize it the color I want. This over here, I'll still be selectable. And if I try to copy this, flip it, and color it, it makes selection a pain in the butt. That's why I never use non-destructive building. If you know what you want, then commit to it, go to it. And if you're worried about losing something, this is where I'll create a layer that I keep in all my build files, and I'll just make copies of things and just move it to that layer. It's like a vector junk drawer, if you will. So that's what I use. I just turn it to a compound with my keyboard shortcut, trim it however I want, And if it goes back to a group nature, this is where I'll just hit F7 again, turns into a compound. But in this case, I thought I want another element here. So we're going to go ahead and just align this shape with this. And I'm going to take this one. I'm going to make an edit by adding this shape to here by going to Pathfinder and going to Unite. But notice again, any kind of, whether you're removing or adding to a shape that's a compound, Illustrator by default will remove the compound nature and change it to a group. Why? I don't know. They've never really explained it to me, and it's inconsistent with other tools that retain the nature. You saw when I showed you, I'm going to be showing you something actually coming up where you can create your own functionality to retain it, and that's why I created a functionality I'm going to show you. But I always use the F7 key, so whenever it's a group, that way I can just hit F7, change it to a compound. I can go ahead and color this. I can clone it with the F3 key. We can go to reflect, find a central anchor point, reflect it over, color it, and we can get our work done a lot faster than playing with all the stupid hassles that Adobe decides to include in their software. So if you've ever kind of gotten frustrated with compound paths, no, you're not the only one. This is how I resolved it way back. This goes back like 15 years now that I've been using this. Let's jump to the next one. This one's more in context of just you're in the focus, creative focus mode. You might be zoomed in on a piece of artwork like this you're creating, and I like the shading over here, so I want to create the shading over here. So we'll go grab the Blob Brush, and I'll just go ahead and draw out the shading for the nose over here. And if, by the way, if you've never used the Blob Brush, it's great. I'm just using my my mouse. And then I might take this nose and I might clone it. Once again, there's an Air keyboard shortcut. They all work together. And I can select this. I can go intersect. I can select the eyedropper and color it. And this is great. This is why I use keyboard shortcuts to build like this. But there's times when I'm zoomed in on something like this, hyper-focused on an area usually, and you can't see the background. Because I usually just click on the background to deselect everything. And there is, if I go up to select, there is a deselect, but once again, it was like a command like this I could never remember. So I just change it to the F8. So I don't even have to go up there, because if I click on the background here, I didn't click on the background. I just selected this darker shape, and you can see it's selected over here. So I'll just hit F8. Now everything's not selected, so I don't accidentally move something or nudge it over by accident. And it's something that I created just because I found myself in that context enough to make it worthwhile. Do I use it every single day? No, but when I need it, it comes in handy. Let's take a look at creating a keyboard function, a keyboard shortcut that works like your own functionality. So I showed you how compound paths are inconsistent in Illustrator. Well, you can create your own. And I use the compound, the Pathfinder method I use the most is -front. I called this punch because in freehand, the same functionality, they're called Boolean functions in vector circles, was called punch in freehand. And I think that makes more sense than -front. It sounds like Yoda named that. -front you will. So what we want to do here is I want to take my Tiki, I want to take this artwork, and instead of always having to go all the way down wherever I keep this palette on your screen, this case it's not so bad, but my monitor at home, I mean, I have it wide open. I have most of my palettes on a second monitor so I can see things as I work. Now I can just hit the F9 key and it does that Pathfinder method for me. Not only it does that, look at the appearance. It retains the compound because the recorded action that I did in Actions does the Pathfinder subtraction using -front, but then it runs my F7 make compound path. So it retains the nature. This should tell you Illustrator could make this work this way by default. They just don't do it because nobody on their team actually uses their software. So let's go ahead. I can just keep working this way, and I never have to touch Pathfinder, select both, hit F9, and I'm done. So it's really cool if you can think of ways to design your own functionality and make Illustrator the work you want, make Illustrator work the way you want it to work. Let's take a look at another one. For many years, if you go to File and you go to Place, there was never any command, even like this, next to Place. Well, they allowed it to be able to be added as a keyboard shortcut. So now I can just hit F10. It'll go wherever. In this case, I'll go to my desktop. I'll select the texture and I'll go Place. That's all we're going to do is we're going to place a texture. I might scale it down a bit like this. Position it over our artwork and color it white just to mock up how a t-shirt design might look. So this is just really simple methods using keyboard shortcuts. Let's take a look at another one. This is where I started frankly, I wish I had a keyboard with 2 rows of F keys. Actually, there is something called a Stream Deck by Elgato Software that I actually use with Illustrator, but I'm not covering it in this. It extends my keyboard shortcuts to 1-button pushes. It's really awesome. You might want to Google that and check it out. But in this case, I just started using Option F1 because I could still do it with one hand using my left hand on my keyboard. So if I'm looking at a design like this and I decide, this yellow is just way too saturated, and I go look at my swatches and I notice, oh, this must be a raw color because none of the color is showing up. If I go to another color like this red and select it, you can see the red gets highlighted, but this one I never actually made a swatch. Well, this is a function in Illustrator. Well, you can go to select and you can go down to same and you can go over and pull down and you can go fill color. So you can select same fill color. Well, that's Command F. Well, I'm sorry, that's Option F because that's what I changed it to. I could never remember that command. It was something I do all the time now. So I can just select this, go Option F1, and it selects all the same color. Once I have it all selected, I can go to the color palette, decide to take 10% off of yellow here. And we're going to go ahead and add about 20 here. I think that looks good. We'll add that to our swatches. Good creative habit, make it a global swatch. Anything with this white triangle in the bottom right means it's global. So I could always come back after I've made it a global, change the color, and wherever it's used in the design will change every permutation of that color being applied, whether it's a tint or not. So a really helpful feature. So that's how I use this. And once again, this works on any color, obviously. I can go Option F1, select all the teal, or maybe it's the green, Option F1, select all those. So really helpful, especially in a complex situation, whether it's a complex illustration or a complex layout, really helpful in those contexts. Here's the other one, same principle, but instead of a fill shape, it selects same stroke color. I don't think this vine is looking great in this kind of tannish color, so I'm going to select it. I'm going to go Option F2. It'll select all of those. That way I can just recolor it a green, and I think that's going to look a lot better. So once again, same principle, just for strokes specifically. Now, as you keep working, you might discover other things that would work good as keyboard shortcuts. I've been doing a lot of types-related things lately, and I get to a point where I might have everything in some design idea. It's all uppercase, and I want to turn it to lowercase. Well, I set up a keyboard shortcut, and I can just go Option F4, and it changes it to lowercase. That's great. Otherwise, I have to go all the way up here to type, pull down to case, slide over and select whatever I want. And I don't want to do that. So what I want to do now is I want to show you how you can set up a keyboard shortcut, because we want to set up Option F5 as a keyboard shortcut to make this one change from lowercase to uppercase. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go to Edit, keyboard shortcuts. You can see my keyboard shortcut set is called GS Commands. You can change to tools if you want, but in this case, we're doing menu. And we're going to go to type. We're going to scroll down to change case. And right now we have the lowercase is F4. You can see I already applied option F5, but let's say that was, we got rid of this one. You could put anything in here you want. Let's say you wanted option F7. You could do that. Now, what's going to happen at times, it'll say the shortcut option F7 was already used by the release command. So if this command isn't something you already use, you can just ignore this. It's not going to make Illustrator not work. It just means that key command that's default in Illustrator is going to change to whatever you are using it for now. In this case, I don't want this option F7. We want this option F5. You just put it in. This is what happens. Now that you have that, don't click OK. You need to save it, and that's what this icon is. So I'll click. It'll ask you a name. Click OK. It'll say, you sure you want to overwrite your set GS commands? Yes, I do. Now you can exit out. That way you can select your type. You're going to hold the option down, and you can go F5, and it'll change it to uppercase. That's literally how easy it is to change keyboard shortcuts. So think about what you want to change and just go in there and start kind of scroll around and realize, oh, you know what? I do that a lot, and that might be a good one you could change into a keyboard shortcut. So that's as easy as it gets for changing a keyboard shortcut. Now we're going to get into kind of designing your own functionality. It might be a project-specific one. In 2021, every day for a whole year, I did artwork for a series I called Modern Culture. They were all identically proportioned squares. All the interior lines were the same weight, the exterior lines that wrap around them, all the same weight. And I did this even though the themes are very diverse, from strange and bizarre to animals to anthropomorphic hot dog man up here. You know, it was all over the map, but they work together and unify as a whole, as a set, because I kept all the tolerances the same way. Well, after creating about 30 of these, I ended up creating 374 the whole year. I decided I'm going to be doing a lot of these. I might as well automate part of the process just to make it go a little faster. And so that's what I want to walk you through right now, is how I did that. So let's go ahead. This is the exact size. We're on an 8.5 by 11 horizontally oriented artboard here. Even though you don't see the edge, I hide that to make the movies look a lot cleaner. This is pretty small. It's not that big. So we're going to go ahead and open this. This is our actions. And you can see I have one that I created and showed called Punch and Clone. I've already shown those in action. We're going to just add to this set called GS Actions here. So with our object selected, I'm going to go ahead and go to New Action. This will bring up this, and we can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to call this Build. It's going to be part of our GS Actions set. You can color it. I usually color red. Doesn't matter. You can color it whatever you want. And we're going to pick an F key that I'm not using, which is F11. And we're going to hit record, and then we're going to do some things, and it's going to record those actions. So let's click record. And now the first thing I want to do is I want to change the color from magenta to black, like that. Next thing I want to do is I want to go over to scale, and we can scale it however large or small you want. In this case, I do want it 200, so it's blowing it up twice as big. We'll click OK. And then I want to go to stroke, and I want to change this to 8 points, like that. That's it. Now we're done. We can click the stop button in the actions panel, and it stops it. We can even collapse this folder. So now we have an action called Build. Let's go ahead and test it now to make sure it's working. Go back to Layers. Go to this one. We'll select it. And all we're going to do is we're going to hit the F11 key with this shape selected, and it does that action. Now, the reason why I did this is because I get it to a certain point, I build smaller, then I always blow all the artwork up for that set 200% and build from there. Now, one thing I want to point out before I close this is I just hit the F11 key we assigned to it. Most people see the actions palette like this, and I did for years until I worked at Upper Deck, and I saw somebody using it one day, and they had this mode turned on. All this is it turns all the actions into clickable buttons. So you can see our build one here. Yes, you could hit F11, or you could just hit this as well. So I just wanted to show you that, and we'll demonstrate that in a little bit. Let's go ahead and go to the project I want to show you. So with this project, the Modern Culture I worked on, I'd do a sketch like this, and I'd create all my base art like this, and I get to this point in building and realize I'm done. I can turn my sketch off. These two I toss because those were just to guide my building efforts. And then I would select this artwork, and normally I'd have to size it up, change the color of the stroke, and beef up how big the stroke was. All I have to do now is select it and hit F11, and it does all that for me. So it goes a lot faster. It doesn't take a ton of time to do that, but still having that little shortcut after 300 some odd times of doing it, it does add up. So that's how you can do it with the F key. Here's how you can do it with a button on your actions panel. Just click build, and it does the same thing. It actually even goes a little faster for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. But so I always keep my actions in button mode, and it's really close since I'm right-handed. It's very close to just go over, click some, go over, click some. So once again, a lot faster than doing multiple actions through the pull-down menus, etc. The final art for this specific design ended up coming out like this. So you know yourself and your work better than anyone else does. So audit how you work. Figure out what routine tasks you do most often in Adobe Illustrator when you're in the midst of creating your design and artwork. Those will be great candidates to consider simplifying the process using keyboard shortcuts or developing your own functionality of sorts using a recorded action in combination with keyboard shortcuts. Just remember, not everything in Illustrator is recordable. That's unfortunate, but it is the reality. Some things you just can't record through pull-down menus. For example. If you like this movie, please consider sharing a link to my YouTube channel on social media. I'd really, really appreciate that. Thank you for watching People Love Process. I hope this content helps you improve your own creative process.